name is Jessica. I'm here with Camilla, Cody, and Michael, presenting on empatica, which I am assuming nobody has heard of. Tonight we're excited to share with you about a truly innovative company that's making waves in wearable healthcare technology. So you can kind of think how the Apple Watch checks your heart rate. Same idea, but much, much bigger. What began as a company determined to change the lives of people with certain health disorders and their caregivers, empatica has expanded their vision and are paving the way to revolutionize the entire healthcare industry. One thing I'm going to go ahead and do, Moose, I'm going to start with you. This is not an Apple Watch. This is one of empatica's main products. It's going to make a lot more sense later, but go ahead and take a look at it. If it lights up, don't worry about it. It's away from my phone, so it might turn red and get mad. But that's okay for now.
Can we keep it?
No. Pass it around. Before we really get into their products, just a few things to go into that will help make the product make a little bit more sense. Epilepsy is one of the most common neurological disorders worldwide. About 1 in 26 people at some point in their life will develop epilepsy in some form. Though epilepsy can sometimes be traced to a specific disorder or condition, for many patients, they have no idea why it happens. And that's what's so crazy about the brain. Actually, approximately 50% of people diagnosed with epilepsy, there is no underlying cause. Additional treatments can include brain surgery, there's a vagus nerve stimulation, a lot of other treatments. But even with that, 1 in 3 people will not gain full seizure control. So it's called a breakthrough seizure. So you're doing well, the system is working, and then you just have a seizure. Later this evening, Michael and myself will be more thoroughly describing the product. But what this really goes into is empatica is looking for a way to cover these gaps in healthcare. There's only so much you can do when it comes to epilepsy. And a personal story of how we're even familiar with this company. In 2013, I was living on my own, I was freshly in my 20s, and out of nowhere I had a seizure. I continued to have seizures. Within a few months I had quit my job, I wasn't allowed to drive, I was living with my mom, and treatments are working and you're starting to get stabilized, but there's always that fear of, what if I have a seizure and no one knows? What if I have a seizure and no one's home? And that's the gap that they're really trying to cover. Before we really go into their product specifically, Camilla wants to go more into what the market for wearable healthcare technology looks like right now.
All right, so I'm just gonna move here so people can see me a little bit better, being 5'3". So first I have a video right here that I would like to share with you all about wearable technology.
CES is the place to see the very latest in wearable technologies. Advanced sensors, smart fabrics, cloud computing, flexible membranes, and more are taking wearables far beyond smartwatches. But they have their growing pains too. Whether they're effective, safe, or secure enough are still often open questions.
Well, with wearable technology, we're seeing a lot of innovation in the different types of sensing technology. We see with the Apple Watch, they're able to measure very sophisticated heart rate and variability and other types of metrics. Miniaturization of the sensor technology has really enabled this field to blossom.
Narbis says the glasses it brought to CES use neurofeedback and a NASA-developed algorithm to train the brain to improve focus. CEO Devin Marco says a couple of years ago, this technology would have only been available in a clinician's office. The next generation of wearables often take advantage of brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs. Their computers acquire brain signals, analyze them, and translate them into commands for an output device to carry out a desired action. Take Brain Up, for example. Researchers from Stanford, MIT, and Harvard used a BCI for this wearable sleep aid product.
We did in clinical trials. The data was really, we like the data very much. It's 7 out of 10 people who could get into sleep in 20 minutes. Yeah, so that's a good sign of brain-computer interface to solve people's problems.
All right.
CES.
There we go. So the market overview. Well, wearable healthcare technology has gotten so weaved into society that we see smartwatches being kind of mainstream, and on top of this, we see that wearable healthcare and just wearable technology is not on the decline, because technology is constantly evolving, constantly throwing in new innovations, and so it is constantly changing. And on top of this, we have not seen, sorry, that was not what I was going to say. In fact, a report from Insider Intelligence show that over 80% of people who are actually inclined to wear, to monitor their health and signs, they actually show more eagerness to do that through wearing these type of technology gadgets. So during just the past few years, it has actually been so much on the rise. It has, again, been kind of mainstream to where consumers have actually tripled their use of wearable technology. And so we have these classic examples of, for example, Fitbit and Apple Watch. And these type of technologies, they have similar functions where they do track you in terms of steps, for example, or in terms of monitoring your heartbeat, but at the same time, not all smart watches are the same. And so that's where Embrace 2, and Embrace, of course, comes in with empatica. And so when it comes to empatica, they are Empatica's Embrace, They are an award-winning smartwatch, and not only this, but it is also the first wearable healthcare smartwatch which has been cleared by the FDA for use within neurology. And so Embrace is using AI to monitor both before, during, and after seizures that you have, and on top of it, it is monitoring these type of really dangerous seizures as well, which is called grand mal seizures. And what it does is it also, while it is monitoring these seizures, it is also pushing out an alert to your caregiver, who could then come and help you. And so with all of this, we're wondering, okay, who is their competitor? And after doing a lot of digging, we found EpiWatch by Johns Hopkins. There are researchers who decided that they wanted to create this sort of app that is called EpiWatch. They introduced that in 2015, and it was designed to do something similar to Embrace 2 and Embrace by Empatica, but not completely the same. It does track data from before, during, and after seizures. However, it doesn't really compare that much. First and foremost, they are not FDA approved for neurology. They are not a wearable healthcare gadget. They are an app that is developed for Apple Watch, but we know that Apple Watch is not a developed healthcare tool for consumers to use. And last but not least, we also have the data collecting app, which is only functioning kind of like a journal in a way. And so we wanted to do a SWOT analysis, and one of the strengths that Empatica has is that it is award-winning technology with also being FDA approved. It definitely has some competitive advantage, considering that they are actually the only one out there in the market that does exactly what they do, which shows, again, huge innovation. We also see that it does have some weaknesses because it is a niche market, and so me, someone who does not have epilepsy, I can't really have any use for that watch. And on top of it, it is also low brand awareness, as Jessica pointed out. A lot of us here have probably never heard of it before. With opportunities So in 2020, they actually expanded to 12 new countries. So they are taking those small steps, but I mean, during COVID, that certainly pushed them back in order to expand even more. So they still have that opportunity to go more global. And of course, we have the threats where we have the rise of technology, and especially wearable technology. We see that in the recent years, it has tripled, and that also shows that there's huge potential for competitors in the future.
All right, so for the company's beginnings, Empatica was founded in 2013 in Cambridge, Massachusetts, by Matteo Lai, Simone Tognetti, Maurizio Garbarino, and Rosalind Picard. And Professor Picard was, she worked at MIT, and she was the one that kind of founded the whole thing. Currently, Picard serves as the part-time chief scientist and chairman of the board, while Matteo is a full-time CEO, Tognetti is CTO, and then Garbarino is the CSA. So development of the first product started off at MIT, like I said, with the initial goal of measuring stress levels based off the readings of the skin. In 2007, Professor Picard's team of MIT Media Lab developed a wearable detector that measured changes to the surface of the skin, communicating the main components of stress. For the first time in daily life, you were able to identify this before you even know it. While trying to help people with autism to be better understood, Picard found an unusually huge response from one participant, and it ended up being a sign of what Camilla was talking about, the seizure, the what was it called? Malgram seizures. There's a good TED talk she has, talks about the story of how this all became. One of her students took home these sensors that was meant for children with autism to measure their stress levels. And so the student took two of them home, and the student put one on both wrists of the student's little brother, and they noticed that one of the sensors was extremely high in stress while the other one was completely normal. And they figured out after a couple of tests and talking to doctors at the Boston Children's Hospital that was actually a sign of seizures, because the student said she noticed, or the doctors would notice before seizures, kids would have goosebumps and just on like one side of the body, and that ended up being a sign, and that was what helped create this product. So for the timelines of the products, there's 3 products up here. There's Embrace, Embrace 2, and then E4. Obviously there's a bunch of different versions of E4, but so Embrace was the original product in 2015 in a partnership with the Epilepsy Foundation. Empatica launched a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo for the creation of the wrist-worn device for monitoring and alerting to grand mal seizures. It received over $100,000 in donations within 24 hours is what the goal was. Like I said, originally it was for helping out with kids with autism. And then in November 2018, they upgraded to the Embrace 2. Is an updated version of the original product. This product included increased battery life with a different watch interface while keeping the sensoring technology and alert functions the same. And so, like Camilla was talking about, this product is meant as like a safety precaution. So once they realize you might have a seizure, it lets your caregiver know that that's happened. The next product, E4, B4 is more of a research tool for scientists. B4 is a medical grade wearable device that offers real-time psychological data acquisition, enabling researchers to conduct in-depth analysis and visualization. So it's just more of a research tool rather than what the Embrace does.
So for our case study here, and I apologize if I trip up a little bit, this was originally what Jordan was going to be going over with you guys. In 2018, it became the only wearable watch cleared by the FDA to detect seizures. This guy here is actually the original Embrace that I purchased their first launch in 2015. So Embrace 2, the functionality is exactly the same, but in the Embrace 2 you would see some additional upgrades to some of the sensors, yes, but also mainly to the way the app interacts with the user. So it's kind of the same idea. Both the Embrace 1 and Embrace 2 got the FDA clearance. It's proven to be 98% effective in detecting seizures. And this is an interesting piece because it does have a lot of AI algorithms in it, where the more seizures you have or the more false alarms you have, as you put that into the app, it starts to recognize you more. So this is very specific to the user. It's going to detect a seizure much faster in somebody who's been wearing it longer than in somebody who just put it on. In 2019, it became cleared for all people over the age of 6, pending a prescription. Because it is a medical device, a doctor has to prescribe it, and they will not mail you the product until you've actually uploaded the prescription into their system.
Before we go further into this, just a small comment to throw in. That is not for all countries. When they did
Yes.
expand in 2020, there are several countries where you do not need a prescription to get that.
That is very true. There is a video here, but we actually thought it might be a little more fun to do an actual presentation of the product instead of having you guys watch another video. I no longer use this. So I put Camilla as my caregiver, and I'm gonna go ahead and start now. It's gonna take the full 20 seconds to tell her that I'm seizing, because I'm not. If it had the stress signals in my skin, if my heart rate was going up, which actually might be because I don't like presenting, which stress levels too, maybe it'll go faster. But what it'll do, and I'm hoping it works because I just reactivated it yesterday, is first it's gonna alert my phone that I'm seizing. So say I'm going for a run or doing something else, and I could click that it's a false alarm so it won't notify Camilla. And now I'm starting to wonder if it's gonna work for us. Hold on. We might end up playing the video. Hello. So essentially what it's supposed to be doing right now is popping up on my phone, are you experiencing a seizure? Obviously if I was, I couldn't click no. So it would text Camilla, and it would actually give her details on my location as well. Okay, this is not gonna work. Something's going on here. It's supposed to work. It would give her my location, and it would basically tell her, like, check in and make sure she's okay. So if she wasn't with me, she could call 911 and give them my exact location. Let's go over this here real quick. It's a pretty quick video. That's the red circle it's supposed to do when I was just shaking my arm for fun. So that's that on there. It's just really about giving confidence to whoever's wearing it. And like in my situation, obviously my mom freaked out. I was never allowed to go anywhere on my own, and it was, you know, super fun in my 20s to have my mom tagging along everywhere. So once you kind of find that rhythm and you're in a spot where you're not having a lot of seizures but you still want to be protected, it's a great option for people to have more independence so you don't have to feel that hovering. Another great thing about this is they use it to track the actual data, so that when you go to your doctor, it has it all laid out in what's called the MATE app, and it tracks when your seizures were, how long they were, if there was time in between the seizures. It also tracks how much rest you got for the day, your movement, and you can log your medications. So as it tracks everything, it learns you tend to have a lot of seizures when you get under 6 hours of sleep. That goes directly to this app, and you can tell your doctor, and you work on things like that. Or I had a particularly active day, and that's when I had a seizure. So you can accommodate your lifestyle for that specifically. So that's really where they got innovative compared to the app that just tracks a seizure. Like, well, I know I had a seizure because I woke up and I was like, oh no, I'm on the floor. But you need more information if you're gonna actually have this be wearable healthcare technology. A lot of information goes into that here with how the sensors are set up. And Michael's really gonna go into how all that came together.
Yeah, so this is a bigger version of that diagram, and it talks about all the different components within. I'm really going to touch on just 4 of the main sensors that go into the active detection. So it's going to be the accelerometer, the gyroscope, the electrodermal activity electrodes, and then for some reason not mentioned here is there's actually a temperature sensor as well, which I imagine is in the bottom cover since that's what makes contact with the skin. This is important for both early and active detection because for some patients, actually being exposed to high temperatures for long periods of time can actually trigger a seizure, so that's good for that early activation. And then also people who are experiencing a convulsive seizure usually have a peak in body temperature, so that's what helps with the active detection. For the types of accelerometers and gyroscopes inside this device, it's the MEMS type. This is also found in your cell phones and other wearable technology, tablets, things like that. MEMS stands for micro electromechanical systems. These both measure movement just in a different way. And they measure it by a change in capacitance, which generates a value associated with the movement type to show how forceful that movement is. This is important because convulsive seizures result in involuntary physical movement, so you need to be able to detect that. As Jessica said, it has to take about 20 seconds of a convulsive seizure to actually report that. So on the top right here, we have an accelerometer. So how this works is it's typically stationary. The green parts are fixed plates, and the red part is the mass, which is attached to 4 springs in the corner. This works on 3 axes, and it measures linear motion. So as motion is detected, it'll actually start moving, and that's what will measure the value. This is how your phone also uses. If you turn it to the left, that's how it knows to orient the screen that way. And then on the bottom is the gyroscope, and this measures angular motion. So as you can see, it shows here the driving direction. So the difference between this and the accelerometer is that this is actually always moving. And then when it gets thrown off balance from the angular motion, it'll actually move side to side this way. And that's what will register that value. And the real innovative technology in here that separates this from every other device is the fact that it has these electrodermal activity electrodes. So what these do is they detect sympathetic activation, which whenever your brain experiences excitement, such as stressors, whether it's physical, emotional, or cognitive, it'll actually send off this activation. And it is the skin is the only organ that is purely innervated by the sympathetic nervous system, so that's how they detect it. And it can be observed through increases in sympathetic activation by monitoring subtle electrical changes across the surface of the skin. So this is a chart here that shows the electrodermal activity as well as accelerometry. And you can see here, these kind of tasks here, these are more like everyday tasks. For us, it would be doing homework, giving a presentation, taking an exam. So stressors like that. And also another interesting one I thought is that for most people, the highest peak of the day is actually when you're sleeping, but they don't know why because there's still a lot of sleep science that is unknown. And then you can see here these astronomical peaks. These are actually times of seizure. So this is very important to be able to detect these. And you can see these lines for the highest peaks also line up with the highest peaks for the accelerometry. So that's why both of them work so well together to be able to detect these types of seizures. And then we have some case study questions.
So these go back more into just how empatica and Embrace is kind of lining up in the market. We don't really need to answer or have you guys answer these for us. We just wanted to bring them up on how would you assess the industry competition through the lens of Porter's 5 factors of competition. As Camilla was going through, there's not a lot of competition. Nobody else is currently in the market for this type of healthcare technology, but healthcare technology is moving that way. Like the video she showed, there's a lot of research going into sleep, a lot of wearable healthcare technologies going into other sectors. As far as neurology, this is the only one which makes them a huge threat to substitutes or new entrants. You would have to get around some patents and figure out how to do this in a different, innovative way. But they have been, in this market since 2013, and in the 9 years they've been in business, nobody has found a way to either copy them or make the same thing happen but better. Second question for ways of improvement. In the competitive advantage in this field, for this specific device, you don't have competition that you're actively competing with. So what improvements are you going to make? Biggest one would be increasing the accuracy. Can we make it 100%? That's a good question because even EEGs are not 100%. And just going into working with the range of seizures. This particular device is only cleared for convulsive seizures where you're actively shaking. What about seizures where you don't shake? And it's just detecting through the skin? How accurate can that be? So just some ideas for where Empatica may be going with this specific product. Now, just like with any company, staying relevant requires new innovations. You need to be continuously innovating. Empatica is taking strides in the way that they're looking at healthcare technologies and looking at things outside of their wheelhouse of just dealing with epilepsy. So Embrace Plus is their new one. You can tell from the video they're moving away from the specific consumer and looking at the entire healthcare industry and how can we revolutionize the way we do things in healthcare. Embrace Plus is their new device. It is currently in testing. You can't just go out and buy one, but with specific health conditions or if you're already partnered with clinical trials, you can actually access this device and the platform they're using. So the Embrace Plus is used a lot with clinical trials because studies have shown 89% of patients are not able to fully comply with paper diaries. So that's writing down, when you rested, when you had stress. You have to keep track of a lot of things if you're part of a clinical trial. Number one, it's overwhelming. And number two, you miss stuff. You're also always going in to have basic vitals checked. And it gets really overwhelming, and I think it was about 65% of clinical trial patients drop out solely because the workload is too much, not because the treatment isn't working. That's what they're trying to do here. This system is tracking 30 different biomarkers and vitals, and it automatically uploads it to Empatica Care, which is their new platform. Physicians and researchers can go through all of that data. They can look at everything all in one place. It also self-analyzes, comparing patients and seeing if patients from this area or this age, how does that compare when you're looking at the basic data when they're going through a clinical trial. They're right now being used in clinical trials for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, epilepsy, and their newest one has been some really in-depth research into autism, which is what they had started out with and was their original passion. Another fun thing that I found out, Translational Research Institute for Space Health, that's NASA. They are the only smartwatch to be used by NASA, and they're using it for sleep data, health data for astronauts when they're up in space. One of their last innovations that they've come out with is Empatica Aria. It works with Empatica Plus, and it's used to detect high-risk exposure to COVID. So in 2020, they had a lot of things going on with trying to get additional FDA approvals for their other devices, but they switched gears to Empatica Aria to track your physiological data, and it tells you when you're at a highest risk of COVID. Obviously, like the temperature of your skin is big, but also when you have a respiratory disorder of any kind, there are other symptoms that can be tracked using this type of watch. So what they're doing here is, pending FDA approval, It has shown reliability in detecting exposure and also just understanding how the body reacts when you do have COVID. So they have clinical trials where if you have a confirmed case of COVID, you wear this watch to track the data and see how things change over time. So with continued innovation in this industry, questions have been raised about like the safety and the efficacy of these products in protecting patient health and our data. Can we trust them to accurately give us this information? One of the big things with this particular device is, what if I have a seizure and it doesn't detect it? Or what if I'm not having a seizure, but it calls my mom and tells her I am? So there's a lot of risk in that area as well. Also, can they keep my health data safe? I don't want all of my information out there for the world. So before we take questions, I would actually like to ask you guys, is this type of wearable healthcare an innovative health solution, or do you feel like it's a risk to patient wellness? Yeah?
I think that is a solution for sure, just because, like, my boyfriend's mom had epilepsy, and not only that would have been, like, amazing for her, but also, like, for us, because when we weren't there with her, it was like, what's going on? Why isn't she answering the phone? You know, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's like, I think this for sure is a solution. I know people are kind of, like, hesitant to have their information tracked, but, like, I think the pros definitely outweigh the cons for this.
Anybody else feel opposite, that maybe it could there's too much risk involved?
Our data's out there already.
Right. One of the biggest risks that goes into is just like patient wellness. Like, can it really accurately do this where it doesn't put the patient at risk? But most people would argue it's preferable to be living in a hospital where they can track you 100% of the time. So with that, are there any questions for us? Yeah.
I have one in terms of like liability. So let's say that you do have a seizure and it doesn't detect it. Is there any way empatica can be held liable for that?
There is a liability waiver that you sign. As with any lawsuit, I'm sure you could sue if you wanted to, and if you had a good enough lawyer, they might be able to find some loopholes. But you do sign a lot of documentation before you can even buy the product, so they're protecting themselves pretty well. Yeah.
Are these watches like water resistant or proof, so like
Yep.
if you're swimming, you'll be alright?
Yep, I think it's up to like 50 feet, which I'm not going anywhere near that. Yeah, he was first.
So I saw that it said like the new one has 48 hours plus of battery life. So like, and you said that sometimes like you might need it even when you sleep.
Yeah.
Like, when is like how do you charge it? Like, does it quick, or do you have to take it off and then?
No, you do have to take it off, but it does charge pretty quick. This is the older version, and it charges in an hour and a half.
Okay.
And most people can find at some point in their day that they're either in a safe space where if something happened, they're okay, or there's somebody else with them. That is, kind of one of the concerns, like at some point it does have to be charged, and I know they were looking into being able to charge just by being near a charger, but right now they haven't quite figured that one out. Especially because if you're charging it in your sleep, like you can't move your arm, and what happens then? But yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah.
How does the consumer get their hand on it? You mentioned that you need a doctor's note, so to speak.
Yeah.
So on the website, you go in, you put on your info, you ship an info, and it says within 120 days. But I guess my question is here and internationally, because you don't need a doctor's note.
Yeah, some countries, yeah.
Yeah, is it at that point, is it retail? Do you walk into a store and buy it?
No, they have no physical locations. So everything is online. So if you went to like add it to your cart, you could buy it, but they're not gonna ship it until you upload your prescription, for the US at least. In other countries, you just buy it and they ship it to you, and it comes with instructions for setting up the 2 different applications. But yeah, a lot of people, it is one of those companies that unless you have epilepsy, you're not gonna find out about them because they're not relevant to you. I found out about them at an epilepsy conference very shortly after I was diagnosed. That's when they had started their Kickstarter and they were trying to raise money. We're like, wow, what a cool idea. Let's keep an eye on that, like when it does come out. And as soon as it came out, we were like ready to go. So yeah, they make themselves known in places where they're relevant. And then even my doctor had no idea who they were though. I had to go and say, I want this, can you write me a prescription? And then he did research and then he did.
Quick question, when you were doing your research, have you seen any medical insurance companies offer to buy this for epileptic patients yet? Or can you make a claim and maybe your insurance could cover the cost of purchasing this?
Yep, so on their website, they do say before you purchase, contact your insurance company. My insurance company would not cover it, and probably most would say the same because it's still technically new, and they don't like to pay for new stuff, but they have had some success, especially in European countries. A lot of times it can be, once the prescription goes through, that's all paid for and you get reimbursed, but not so much in the US.
Thank you.
Somebody over here had their hand up.
How much
Yeah.
does it cost?
250.
Is it 250? Okay.
For the first two.
I bought mine for 120, so I got the deal for getting in early. Yeah.
So, a lot of wearables today are getting more and more accurate, so I was wondering, with this wearable, what technology makes theirs medical grade?
I believe in the way they constructed the sensors. You know, your Apple Watch has a few sensors, and so does the Fitbit. This has 12 highly specific biomarker sensors, so it's looking for very, very specific things.
Yeah, it's also that electrodermal activity.
Yeah.
That's unique to this device. There's no other device that uses that.
Yeah, so unless you're in a hospital, there's no other device that's gonna read those sensors on your, or the stress levels on your skin and such. Jojo?
Well, I was just thinking about this case with the Apple Watch where this guy like got into a freak accident and his heart stopped,
Mhm.
and it called 911. If your heart stopped with this, would it like call the provider, or would it?
It does not. No, it tracks that data internally, but like if my heart stopped during a seizure, it's not gonna tell Camilla, my caregiver. So that's one thing that they had to be very careful with in how they got FDA approval for it. Yeah, that one gets really tricky, especially because if it falls off or slips, is it gonna tell someone that I'm dead? You know, so they've had to formulate it in a way. Half of their office is based in Milan, so they've had to formulate it in a way that works in the U.S. but is also certified in European countries. They did test with calling 911 as one of the caregivers, but again, it would go off sometimes if I'm running. Or one of the biggest issues they've had is pushing a shopping cart because it is bumpy over the driveway when you're getting to your car. It would always go off. So I don't want to call 911 when I'm just trying to put my groceries away. So that part gets a little tricky. Anything else? Yeah.
Is the marketing mostly like word of mouth?
Yes. Word of mouth. They do a lot of epilepsy conferences. A lot of neurology offices, you could find like little pamphlets of products that are relevant in that arena. But yeah, they don't really market to the public. There's just not a big enough use case for it. All right, thank you.